Today I'm sharing how I transformed this thrifted box into a beautiful, pretty little blanket box. I'm using a new to me color, which will hopefully inspire you. It's a gorgeous neutral, along with some salvaged hardware and some salvaged feet. And I can't wait to share what it looks like now. Let's get started. Here's the box I found at the thrift store, piled on top of a bunch of other things. It was selling for $20.99, and I also had a 20% off coupon. So not a bad price because this box is sturdy. I checked it out while my sister played a thrifted ukulele in the background. When I brought it home down to my studio, it looked better than in the thrift store, and I gave it a really good once-over. You can see that it's wood composite, and it has a veneer over top. So this is not a solid wood cedar chest or a solid wood anything chest. However, it is sturdy. There was missing hardware. I really liked the wood embellishments on the side. However, I did not like the wood on top. I guess it could be used as a bench, but I think it really dated the piece. There was also a little bit of missing veneer off the back. So the first thing I did was get rid of the thing that was bothering me the most, which was the wood trim on the very top of this box. And the funny thing was I took out my mallet and started hammering away, which did work. However, I just was oblivious to those little round plugs that were actually hiding the screws. And it would have been much easier if I had just pried those wood plugs off and unscrewed it. But whatever, I had a little fun. Once the trim was removed, I started removing the hardware. And if you are into or in need of a new impact driver set, this DeWalt set has lasted me for well over 10 years, and it is on for 31% off on Amazon. And I will link that in the description box down below for you, along with the rest of the tools and supplies I'm using in this makeover. I grabbed a plastic cup for this makeover. I put all the screws, hardware, everything in here so it's all in one place. I found this was a great habit to get into because I can't tell you how many times when I first started furniture makeovers that I lost things. I continued my way around this box and removed the hinge and also the long piano hinge. And I believe it's also called a continuous hinge, if I'm not mistaken. I call it piano hinge. And this is the one that lifts the lid of the box up and down. This took a while because I used a manual screwdriver because the screws are so tiny. And I made sure to keep every one of the screws in that cup so I didn't lose anything. The price tag was removed with my heat gun. And the nailed-in plastic feet guide was removed with some pliers. I debated on removing the wood ornate design on the front because I thought, well, if I'm going to redo this blanket box, I'll really change the look of it. But I'm so glad I ended up keeping this. Once I had everything removed, it was time for a super good cleaning. And as usual, I used my white lightning mixed with some water in a spray bottle and an automotive sponge to give this a thorough cleaning on the inside and out. As I was cleaning the lid of this box, I examined the damage that I did while I was removing the wood trim. It wasn't that bad actually, but I did require a painter's tool to knock off some of that loose veneer and some of the wood. I love this painter's tool. It's so simple and handy, and it can do so many things. It's very versatile. You can use it as a scraper, a putty knife, paint roller cleaner, can opener, nail puller, screwdriver, hammer. Oh my God, I'm probably forgetting a bunch of things, but they don't call it 9-in-1 for nothing. So if you don't have one in your inventory, it's super inexpensive, and I guarantee you'll make good use of it. And feel free to let me know if you enjoy these tool recommendations. I know when I watch other YouTube channels and they recommend something that I've never heard of or that I never thought of, I really appreciate it. So now it was time for me to fill in the hardware holes, the screw holes that were on the top lid, and also some of the marks and missing veneer. So I used my all-purpose Bondo putty, which is a two-part system. I like using a golf ball size of the putty with a pea size amount of the hardener, and I mix it all together on a paper plate. I actually prefer using a plastic putty knife to apply the Bondo. I just find the flexibility of it is convenient for me, but you could use metal, whatever you feel more comfortable with. And once this is mixed, you have about a 3 to 5 minute window to use it. So I suggest, and what I like to do is mix it in smaller batches because I don't want any product to go to waste. If I was to mix a huge batch and try and get this everything filled in one shot, the putty would dry up and I'd end up having to chuck it away. And actually, I will show you just that in a moment. So I went ahead and I filled in the entire area where the wood was sitting, just to make sure that it was all super smooth once sanded down. I also filled in all the hardware holes. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm already having to push a little harder to get this Bondo into these hardware holes. This means the Bondo is starting to get a little set. It's starting to set up already. I can feel it. And sure enough, like not more than a minute later, it's not workable anymore. So this is the leftover that I had that I cannot use. This gets tossed and I mix up a fresh batch. I mixed up another small batch and finished off filling in the veneer and the rest of the hardware holes and scratches. I also had to create 2 corners for this box because they were missing. They were chewed out or somebody kicked them out. I'm not sure. But what I did was I just used paint sticks as a form, as a guide, and then I filled this in with Bondo. Again, this Bondo was a little dry, too dry to use, so I had to mix a new batch to fix the 2 corners. Any straight edge will work when you're trying to build up a corner. I had the paint sticks on hand, but any sort of piece of wood, straight piece of metal, anything will work. It's just very helpful to have a straight edge to form your corners with. It won't look pretty when you're finished putting the Bondo in there, but just wait until it gets sanded. And while I was waiting for that to dry, I went ahead and removed the little nubs from the Bondo that had spilled through the hardware holes. Now it was time to sand. Using my Bosch sander with a 120 grit sandpaper, I started sanding all this Bondo smooth. A more aggressive grit sandpaper is ideal for Bondo because it dries rock hard, and I would suggest when using Bondo to use a sander because sanding all this Bondo by hand would take very, very long. That's how hard it dries. I worked my way around the box, making sure to rub my hand over it so everything is blended in and it feels perfectly smooth to the touch. While I was sanding down the repairs and the hardware holes, I did make sure to give the entire box a light scuff sanding as well. And now let's sand these corners into real looking corners. And I always find this quite satisfying. I removed all the dust and brought this box back into my paint room for primer. And here I'm using Bonding Boss, which blocks bleed through, it blocks any odors, and it provides a really, really good base for any sort of paint to stick to. I like using a cheap and expensive chip brush to apply. Here I am using it on the ornate detail on the front. And then I used a 4-inch roller to get all the flat surfaces. And this Bonding Boss applies beautifully. When I used it on my plastic planter, I did learn something though. With this Bonding Boss, you don't want to apply it too thinly because when I applied a very thin layer on the plastic, the next day it just scratched right off. So a nice even coat, an even medium coat is what works best with this. But this stuff is awesome, and it is water-based, and it will stick to glass, plastic, ceramic, tile, and of course wood. I let the Bonding Boss primer dry overnight as instructed, and the next morning I came down and I saw a few little places that needed a little more filler. So here I'm using Dixie Belle Mud. And I love using it with the Bondo because Dixie Belle Mud is so easy to apply and so easy to hand sand. It is perfect for any sort of little imperfections. So I just filled that in. And while I was waiting for the filler to dry, I added some feet, little bun feet that I had salvaged off another piece. Using a square, I measured exactly where I wanted the feet to go. And then I attached the feet to this box using the T-nuts with the thread system. And it's really, really easy to do. I start by finding and attaching the proper sized drill bit. I marked off the depth with some tape. Then finding my mark, I drill a hole. I worked my way around the box, drilling all 4 holes. Then it was time to install the T-nuts, and to do this, I just banged them in with a hammer. If any of you have a different way of doing this, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, but I'm not sure there is another way to do this. I was being pretty gentle with the first one I installed. But then I realized you just really have to hammer them in. And I did find out that the hole can't be the exact size. It does have to be ever so slightly bigger, because I had to re-drill the 3 holes a little larger. This was fun though, and it's a really easy, simple way to install feet when you don't have an existing place to install them. So this works really well, and these T-nuts and the screws are super inexpensive. Once the Dixie Belle Mud wood filler had totally dried, I brought everything back into my sanding room and gave it a hand sanding with a sand sponge. This is really easy to do because this Dixie Belle Mud sands by hand really easily. And as I mentioned, it accompanies the Bondo perfectly, actually. It fills in all the small gaps that the Bondo does not. I made sure to sand everywhere that I had filled, and I also gave the entire box a really quick sanding just to sand down and knock off anything after I had put the primer on it. Now we have a super smooth finish for paint. Woo, so now for the fun part. It's always the prep that takes the longest, right? I chose to use this Chantilly paint color, and it's a new color from Dixie Belle. They're describing it as a white with beige undertones, but I saw a little bit of pink undertones. It has a little bit of pink blush undertone, which was perfect because what I was envisioning for this box from the start was a little girl's toy box or blanket box, probably because of the size. This isn't a full-size storage box. It's on the smaller side. I used my medium oval synthetic brush to apply this silk all-in-one paint. This paint comes with the primer and the top coat already included, and it goes on super, super smooth. It levels out beautifully. So if you're a beginner furniture painter or you're doing pieces for your home, this is a great beginner's paint. You can see here as I'm painting this box, I get the paint on to the area. I work in sections, and I just get the paint on, and then I go back and I smooth it all out in long strokes. And this works beautifully. Then I move on to the next section. So the sides don't get all gooped up or drippy on the bottom and on those sharp edges on the side. I come at the sides at an angle, and this makes sure that the paint isn't going to be dripping and hanging off those corners. Working on the side of the box, you're going to see I go about it the same way. I get the paint on to the section I'm working on, and when I hit those corners and the top, I'm hitting them at an angle. Then once the paint is on the section, I go back and smooth everything out. And then I'll go grab some more paint on my brush and start working on the next section. For the lid, painting the lid, I did the exact same technique. I would put some paint onto my brush, and then working in sections, I applied the paint. I went at the corners and the sides on an angle, and then once the paint was all on, I went back and I smoothed it out in long brush strokes from one end to the next. Then I went on to the next section, the middle section, and I repeated. This will give you such a smooth paint finish because I know a lot of people, including myself, when I first started out, I applied the paint, I went back, I tried smoothing it out. It wasn't looking exactly like I wanted. I went back, smoothed it out again. With this paint, once you smooth it out, just leave it. It's going to self-level, even if you see a few imperfections in the wet paint. If you just leave it be, it's going to self-level beautifully, and you'll end up with a near sprayed paint finish, even just by brushing on. It has about a 5-minute open time. Of course, this depends on the humidity and the temperature of the room you're working in, but it does have an open time, so you don't have to rush with it. But again, you do not have to keep going back and smoothing everything out. Once it's smoothed out the first time, let it level itself out. It's going to do its thing. And what fun. There's something very therapeutic about painting. It's almost meditative. I gave these cute feet 2 coats of Chantilly using my medium oval brush. Whenever I paint anything on the round, whether it's spindles, a chair leg, arm leg, or even these cute little bun feet, I always go in the circumference rather than up and down. And this gives me a brush-free finish. It's like the slap-on technique, except with these small, tiny feet, you can kind of only simulate the slap-on technique. So you just kind of go the round. And again, this gives me a super smooth finish. To assemble the lid back onto the box, I grabbed the piano hinge and started screwing it all back in. And again, I took the plastic cup that I had all the hardware in. It's so convenient to do it this way. I always make sure that I test the hinge before I actually start screwing it all together, because I'm embarrassed to say that on more than one occasion, I have installed these wrong. And with all these screws, it is not fun to take them all out and have to reposition this. I reinstalled the metal chest hinge, double checking that it was installed properly and everything worked perfect. The cute little feet were all dry, so it was time to screw them into the bottom. And for added protection, I added these felt pads on the bottom. And this way it won't be scratching anybody's flooring. To stick with the theme of this girly feminine chest, I found these brass bow hardware handles salvaged from another makeover. And I only had 3, so I thought this was perfect. 2 on each side, 1 on the front of the trunk, and this was just meant to be. So what I did was I measured center on the front of the box on the lid, and using my inexpensive hardware template, I found out exactly where I wanted this brass bow hardware to sit, and I drilled the hole. And that famous line applies: measure twice, drill once. Actually, I think it's measure twice, cut once, but same. I repeated the same process on the side. I measured center, and then using my inexpensive template tool, and these are fabulous. I'll also include this in the description box below if you're interested. They cost all of like $5, and I cannot tell you how handy this plastic tool is. It's so easy to use. And if you're working with wood composite and you're worried about blowing it out, drilling a pilot hole is always a great idea. For the final last detail of this cute little box, I took some bronze gilding wax. I gloved up because this bronze gilding wax is oil-based and it cures and dries hard. It does not need a top coat. And I just lightly touched all that wood carving on the front. I just kissed it with this bronze gilding wax, highlighting all the detail. And when the light hits it just right, it gives it a little shimmer. And just as a reminder, here's what we started with. And here's the after. And I think mission accomplished. I think this would look beautiful in any little girl's room. And who doesn't need extra storage? And just like in the last few makeovers over on the SI blog and here on YouTube, I asked AI to generate exactly what I was envisioning for this little box, and here's what it came up with. I think it would look beautiful in this room, and I'd love to hear what you think. So I really hope you enjoyed today's blanket box makeover, and I hope it inspired you to maybe take a second look at some dated things in your thrift store or maybe even your own home. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified with every new makeover that comes out. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous week. Bye, guys.